In the early 2000s, with the rise of technology, an ambitious young girl appeared. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes. In a short time, she managed to establish a company called Theranos. This company, in a very short time, became a massive global phenomenon. Everyone was talking about it and wanted to be a part of it. And that's because Elizabeth had invented a revolutionary device that no one in the world had ever thought of before. From just a single drop of blood, it could perform hundreds of medical tests. That's why major investments started pouring into the company. And over time, the company's owner, Elizabeth Holmes, became one of the most famous figures in America's Silicon Valley. So much so that they put her picture on the cover of Forbes magazine. But over time, the company began to collapse rapidly. And this beautiful girl transformed into one of the biggest, most wanted con artists in the world. Because what she did and the way she deceived top businessmen, politicians, and even investors was something no one could have ever imagined. You won't believe what she did or how she deceived society's elite, including ministers, owners of large corporations, and even scientists. Watch the episode until the end to know the full story. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe now, and let's begin. Our story today begins with a girl named Elizabeth Holmes. She was born on February 3rd, 1984 in Washington. She was raised in a family with extensive connections and a strong reputation in both political and economic circles. Her father, Christian Holmes, was a politician and held high-ranking government positions. Elizabeth had a great interest in science and technology, and her capacity for innovative thinking began to show. She had a particular interest in health and medicine, and her mother always encouraged her to pursue her passion in these fields. And when she was 13 years old, she invented a simple device to improve voice recognition on mobile phones. Although it wasn't fully developed, it was a testament to her cleverness and great intelligence. She also managed to learn the Chinese language in a short amount of time. And in 2002, Elizabeth enrolled at Stanford University. She was a diligent and ambitious student. However, during her studies at Stanford, she wanted to start her own business. And after just 1 year at the university, she dropped out at the age of 19 to focus on her new company idea. Dropping out of college at that stage was a very bold decision, and it wasn't common at the time for students to leave their university studies at that age and start their own companies. But Elizabeth was determined to turn her revolutionary idea into a tangible reality. What happened was that when Elizabeth was on a visit to China, she worked on researching and testing for severe acute respiratory syndrome. At that time, she felt how much people were suffering from the epidemic due to the lack of health services and rapid testing. From that moment on, she understood that the world truly needed a way to conduct rapid medical tests, ultimately allowing people to perform them in their homes using a simple and reliable device, and then take the correct dose of medication as needed. Her main goal was to make blood testing easier and faster. Through a device that could perform a large number of tests using just a few drops of blood from a person's finger, instead of needing to draw large blood samples from a vein, and at a much lower cost than traditional labs and hospitals. Elizabeth wanted to create a device that was like a small, compact laboratory, capable of running hundreds of medical tests from just a single drop of blood. This device was considered revolutionary because it sped up the analysis process and wasn't expensive. It also spared people with chronic illnesses the pain of needle pricks. The device could also detect signs of any serious condition as a preventative measure. She started presenting the idea to her university professors. But after seeing they weren't enthusiastic about her idea, she presented it to a businessman named Tim Draper. He was her friend's father and, at the same time, a family friend. Draper agreed to the project and his company invested $500,000 in the new venture. Elizabeth chose the name Theranos for it. It's a word that combines the beginning of therapy, meaning treatment, and the end of diagnosis, which means, well, diagnosis. And so, Elizabeth founded her company when she was just 19 years old. In a short period, it received substantial funding, reaching hundreds of millions of dollars, notably including significant support from Rupert Murdoch's company and other investors. This startup raised $1.4 billion from individuals, families, and private equity funds. By the year 2014, Theranos' value reached $9.5 billion, marking a major milestone. This made Elizabeth the first self-made female billionaire in Silicon Valley and the youngest female billionaire in the world, with a potential net worth estimated at $4 billion, according to reports. Over time, and due to Elizabeth's great powers of persuasion, she was able to attract major companies in America like Partner Fund. This company alone invested a large sum in Theranos, around $100 million. This was because they were afraid of missing the boat, given the project's initial success. So they decided to invest early, and they believed in the technology's potential, afraid the opportunity would pass them by. Also, Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, the Walton family of Walmart, who invested $150 million in Theranos through their private family company, and the businesswoman Betsy DeVos, who invested about $100 million. But how did Elizabeth manage to convince and attract all these investments? Elizabeth, despite her young age, had a truly remarkable ability to persuade and always knew how to captivate her audience with her carefully chosen words. She would always present her project as an innovative and revolutionary idea that could potentially change the world, even if there was no real technology available to back up that claim. Elizabeth also used all the well-known cliches in Silicon Valley, like the fascination with ideas, glorifying those who think outside the box, and convincing people that technology can make the world a better place. And so, once Elizabeth collected the money from investors, she started working on developing the first device, named Edison. Its idea was that the device would be able to perform a large number of medical tests using just a few drops of the patient's blood, without needing to draw large samples and wait for them to be tested in labs for the results to come out. So the function of this device was to save time and money and also reduce the effort for the patient. She started bringing in the best engineers who had extensive experience in technology to develop the Edison device for the company. And she was constantly pressuring them to complete the projects as quickly as possible. And to add more expertise to the company, she started using her name, the reputation of her investors, and important people from Silicon Valley to attract major figures to work at the company and join Theranos' board of directors. And indeed, she was able to bring in Don Lucas, who is one of the biggest figures in the business world in America, and appointed him as chairman of the board. He played a big role in supporting Elizabeth's idea and opening doors for her. She was also able to convince George Shultz, the former US Secretary of State, to join the company's board of directors. This diversity of expertise helped her convince investors and build a strong support network of politicians and economists. And anyone new who came to the company wouldn't think to ask too many questions because they'd say, with all these investors, could there be something wrong? So they'd rule out the possibility of it being a scam or anything like that. Also, these individuals helped Elizabeth add credibility to Theranos' products and build a strong reputation for the company. Even if some of them weren't specialists in the medical field, they had extensive experience in other areas. Elizabeth was keen from the beginning on secrecy within the company. She imposed strict non-disclosure agreements on all employees. Even if an employee decided to leave the company, they had to commit to not disclosing any details about it or its technology. And she had a team of lawyers assigned to this specific matter. So if anyone from the company thought about talking or leaking secrets, the lawyers would deal with them in their own way. In this way, Elizabeth was building her team and getting them to work for her big goals in developing Theranos. And at that time, she became one of the most prominent figures in Silicon Valley, and she had a great influence on investors, the media, and even politicians. Everyone considered her one of the most prominent rising figures with an idea that would change the future of medicine and technology. In a short period, Elizabeth became one of the youngest female billionaires in the world, and the spotlight followed her constantly. She was appearing regularly in various media outlets like Forbes, USA Today, NPR, and CNN. And she also appeared in a talk at TEDx. Elizabeth, during this time and in every interview, would talk about her project and her pioneering idea. Every media appearance increased her fame more and more until she became one of the most prominent female entrepreneurs of the modern era. Despite this, Elizabeth handled her fame in a strange way. She was always trying to maintain her perfect image in front of the public. She used every method of persuasion and influence to present herself as an unchallengeable figure, and her idea as the magic solution for all of the era's problems. And over time, everyone started to notice that Elizabeth had a huge obsession with Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. She considered him her role model. So she tried to imitate him in everything, from the way he spoke to his style of work and management. She had a great desire to be like him in the world of entrepreneurship, to the point where she was always trying to imitate him in every aspect of his professional life. For example, when she learned that Jobs held his marketing meetings on Wednesdays, she decided to hold her meetings on the same day as well, and with the same marketing company that Jobs had worked with before. She even recruited employees from Apple, including a close friend of Jobs. This was part of her attempts to imitate him in everything, to the point where she wore the same clothes as him and used the same language when she spoke. She had a speech very similar to Jobs's when presenting his revolutionary products, and this method made her image appear similar to his in the media. Elizabeth's obsession with Steve Jobs reached the point of madness. One of the employees found a newspaper clipping on her desk that said she was the next Steve Jobs. This was a sign of the great obsession she was living, as if she was following Jobs in every step and then wanted to achieve the same success he had. But over time, many questions began to arise, especially from those in the medical field. Because what Elizabeth was claiming was scientifically impossible, medical tests are numerous and can vary greatly from one another in practice. It's also impossible for all tests to be performed in the same way. Many tests require a specific change to the patient's blood sample to match the analysis method. As for the idea that one device could do all of this from a single drop of blood, that's impossible. But Elizabeth responded to all these accusations by calling them misleading, and says that everyone who changed the world was attacked at the beginning. But what Elizabeth didn't know was that over time, all this great success would collapse and this beautiful face would reveal its ugly truth. Because in 2015, the company actually started to collapse. The perfect image of the ambitious young woman would turn into a big nightmare that haunted her everywhere. And the beginning was with the growing doubts about the effectiveness of the technology the company said it was using. The real nightmare began in October 2015, when journalist John Carreyrou from the Wall Street Journal began investigating the hidden matters of Theranos, and published an article in which he revealed many of the secrets through testimonies he collected from former employees and sources within the company. The content of these testimonies confirms that Theranos is a big hoax and a trap that everyone fell into, and that the company was not using its own technologies as it claimed, but was using other testing devices. So when they took a drop of blood, they would actually send it to other labs to test it. And they were using inaccurate third-party testing devices for most of the blood tests they claimed to be performing themselves. And the small percentage of tests that were actually run on the Edison devices still produced inaccurate results. The journalist, Carreyrou, relied on anonymous sources from within the company for his report, which revealed that the Edison device failed to perform most of the tests. And from here, the spotlight started to focus on Theranos, because the report raised major doubts about the company's credibility and the technology itself. He also confirmed that if you ran 2 tests on 2 different machines, each one would give a different result. After that, legal cases were filed against Theranos, including lawsuits from aggrieved investors, as well as from patients who were harmed by the inaccurate test results the company provided. Some of them got tested and didn't actually have any illness, but the reports showed they were sick with certain diseases. And over time, the story became widely known, and investigations began, which uncovered a huge scandal that no one expected. And as this news escalated, confidence in the company and its leadership plummeted. Elizabeth Holmes and the board members began to face lawsuits from the affected companies and individuals. After that, investigations into Theranos began, and the outcome was catastrophic for Elizabeth. In the beginning, Elizabeth continued to hold on tightly to her company and make promises to change the world. But as the investigations intensified, things began to deteriorate further, and official criminal charges of federal fraud were formally brought against Elizabeth by the U.S. Attorney's Office. She was officially accused of forgery, as well as intentionally manipulating and falsifying the numbers and data that were presented to both investors and customers alike. And in March of 2018, the case with Elizabeth was settled, and she lost control of her voting shares in Theranos. She had to give up her equity stake and was also banned from being an officer or director of any company for 10 years. And in September of the same year, Theranos was dissolved after all the scandals and legal problems it faced, and criminal charges were filed against Elizabeth. And on January 3rd, 2022, Holmes was convicted of 4 counts of defrauding investors, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And in November of that same year, she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. She began serving her sentence in May of 2023. And so, Elizabeth began to face a dark fate after losing her status among top business leaders. She became one of the biggest stories in the world of failed companies, and her name is now associated with swindling, lies, and fraud. In the end, if you liked the episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to help it spread. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next case.